Welcome to the literary journey. Hello, dear readers. Welcome to another exciting narrative that transports us to the forgotten pages of history. Today we'll meet Carolina, an 18-year-old young woman who, amid the adversities of imperial Brazil, discovers that sometimes destiny writes stories more beautiful than we dream. Imagine an era where the aroma of coffee mixed with the perfume of roses in manor gardens, where carriages traveled dusty roads carrying secrets and hopes. A time when the heart could find true love even in the most unlikely circumstances. This is the story of Carolina, who discovered that not every arranged marriage is destined for lovelessness, and that sometimes the greatest difficulties lead us to life's greatest gifts. Where are you watching from? Comment your city. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave that like for more exciting stories like this one. Year 1876, Valença, province of Rio de Janeiro, Imperial Brazil. In the heart of the Paraíba Valley, where mountains dressed in emerald green and the aroma of coffee floated like a promise of prosperity, the city of Valença rose like a jewel of the empire. The crimson velvet of the curtains framed a May morning that promised rain. Carolina Ferreira da Silva arranged with trembling fingers the black veil over her chestnut hair, watching through the fogged glass how the last roses in the garden bowed their heads, as if they too were mourning. The silence of the house embraced each room with the weight of grief. 3 days had passed since Dona Rosa had departed, taken by pneumonia that consumed her in less than 2 weeks. The jasmine perfume that always accompanied her mother still floated through the hallways, now mixing with the melancholic aroma of funeral flowers. Carolina descended the wooden stairs that groaned under her feet, each step echoing like a sigh in the mansion's vastness. The main parlor, once filled with visits and laughter, lay empty except for furniture covered with white sheets, ghosts of happiness that had seemed eternal. Her father, Antonio Ferreira, had not appeared even for the burial. Malicious tongues whispered that he was again at card games, betting the family's last rees at the dusty tables in the city's back alleys. Carolina knew these were more than whispers. They were truths that enveloped her like shadows. In the kitchen she found on the pine table a note from the maid. "Miss Carolina, I have left. There's no more money for my payment. May God protect you. Sebastiana." The tears came then, silent and warm, sliding down her pale face like dew on a camellia petal. At 18, Carolina found herself alone in a world crumbling like a sandcastle touched by waves. She sat in the rocking chair that had been her mother's, where Dona Rosa used to embroider for hours, humming ancient melodies. The light pink fabric of her cotton dress contrasted with the pallor of her cheeks, and she wondered how much longer she could maintain dignity, while everything around her vanished. The sound of hooves on the cobblestone street awakened her from her reveries. Through the window, she glimpsed an elegant carriage stopped in front of the iron gate. A tall man, dressed in dark frock coat, walked toward the main door. Could it be a creditor? Another bill to be collected? The man who entered the parlor possessed the bearing of one born accustomed to command. Miguel Henrique Tavares de Almeida, Baron of Itaipava, brought with him the silent authority of landowners and the discreet melancholy of one who had known profound losses. Carolina first noticed his eyes, green like new coffee leaves, laden with a sadness that seemed ancient. A thin scar ran along his neck, from ear to nearly the collarbone, giving him an air of mystery that contrasted with the gentleness of his manners. "Señora Carolina," he said, inclining his head slightly in a respectful bow, "I deeply lament the loss of Dona Rosa. She was a lady of rare virtues." His voice was grave, modulated, carrying the refined accent of one who had studied in good schools. Carolina made a small curtsy, feeling blood rush to her cheeks. "Your Excellency is very kind," she murmured, indicating an armchair of burgundy velvet. "To what do I owe the honor of your visit?" Miguel Henrique remained standing for a few moments, as if measuring each word he was about to utter. Through the open window, the song of BMTV mixed with the distant noise of muleteers on the royal road. "I knew your father some years ago at the city's commercial meetings," he began, hands clasped behind his back. "I learned of the difficulties the family has been experiencing." A blush took hold of Carolina's face. Her father's gambling debts were a topic on every corner, at every tea table in Valencian society. Shame burned her throat like an ember. "I came here," Miguel Henrique continued, "with a proposal that may sound unexpected, but which springs from sincere intentions." The silence that followed was punctuated only by the tick-tock of the pendulum clock in the corner of the parlor. Carolina felt her heart beating irregularly, sensing that his words would forever change the course of her life. "I am prepared to pay all your father's debts, 18 conto de res from what I know, in exchange for your hand in marriage." The words resonated in the room like stones thrown into a serene lake. Carolina felt her legs waver and gripped the arm of the chair. "I know it's an abrupt proposal," he continued, interpreting her silence. "But I observed you some Sundays ago at Santa Casa, caring for orphaned children with a dedication that deeply moved me. I see in you a kind soul, and I believe we could build a marriage based on mutual respect." Marriage. The word resonated in her mind like a distant bell. Carolina thought of her father, probably drunk in some tavern, oblivious to the humiliation his family faced. She thought of the bills to be paid, the house that would be auctioned, the life of begging that awaited her. I need time to think," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand perfectly," Miguel Henrique replied, heading toward the door. "But I must warn you that the creditors grant only 7 more days. If you accept, we could marry next Saturday." After his departure, Carolina remained motionless for a long time, watching through the window as the first raindrops began to drum on the colonial tiles. It was as if her entire life now came down to a single choice: accept a loveless marriage or face complete ruin. What if that man were the answer to her prayers? The bell of the Church of Our Lady of the Conception tolled 9 times on the morning of that Saturday, January 13th, 1877. Carolina gazed at herself in the oval mirror with its golden frame, the last valuable piece remaining in the house. The light blue silk dress had been her mother's, hastily altered by Donna Mariana, the seamstress from the back street. The Flemish lace on the sleeves contrasted with the forced simplicity of the entire ensemble. The tulle veil had belonged to her paternal grandmother, kept in a cedar chest for more than 40 years. Carolina arranged it over her hair gathered in a low chignon, secured with the only mother-of-pearl hairpins she still possessed. There was no procession, no celebration, only Carolina, descending the mansion's staircase in silent farewell to everything she had known. Her father waited in the parlor, trying to disguise the tremor in his hands and the smell of cachaça that emanated from his pores. Antonio Ferreira avoided looking into his daughter's eyes, knowing that there was engraved all his defeat as a man and as a father. The Baron of Itaipava's carriage waited at the door. The coachman, a middle-aged freed black man named Joaquim, descended to help Carolina board. Through the damask curtains she glimpsed the streets of Valencia for the last time as a single woman. The church was almost empty. Only the priest, 2 witnesses and half a dozen curious onlookers who whispered in the back pews. Miguel Henrique waited at the altar, wearing a black cashmere frock coat and embroidered vest. When Carolina entered the nave to the discreet sound of the harmonium, he turned and she could see in those green eyes something she couldn't decipher, whether it was compassion, admiration, or melancholy. The ceremony was brief, the priest's words echoing in the nave like a murmured prayer. Carolina answered yes with a firm voice, surprising herself with her own determination. When Miguel Henrique slipped the gold ring onto her ring finger, she felt as if an entire lifetime was closing and another beginning. "You may kiss the bride," said the priest. Miguel Henrique approached slowly, took her right hand and placed a respectful kiss on her gloved fingers. It was a gesture of reverence, not possession, and Carolina felt a strange gratitude for such delicacy. "My wife," he murmured, only for her to hear. "Baroness Carolina Ferreira Tavares de Almeida." The new name sounded in her ears like a melody in an unknown language. As they left the church, Carolina turned back one last time. Her father stood at the door, his bent silhouette outlined against the morning light. They didn't say goodbye. There were no words for that moment. The carriage then departed, carrying Carolina toward an uncertain future, beside a man she barely knew, but who had offered the only lifeline in her shipwreck. Could it be possible that hope would be born from desperation? The journey lasted 4 hours through winding roads that cut through hills covered with coffee plantations. Carolina watched through the carriage window, the landscape that gradually transformed, from the modest houses on Valencia's outskirts to vast expanses of land that seemed endless. Miguel Henrique had remained respectfully silent throughout the entire journey, only occasionally indicating some regional landmark or a more beautiful panorama. Carolina noticed how he knew every curve of the road, every owner of the farms they passed, greeting with waves the muleteers they encountered along the way. When she finally saw the Santa Rosa farm, Carolina felt her breath escape her lips. The property extended across rolling hills as far as the eye could see. The main house rose on the crest of a gentle elevation, white as a dove, with its 3 stories of green-shuttered windows and a veranda that encircled the entire construction. "It's very large," she whispered almost to herself. 450 alqueires, Miguel Henrique replied with simplicity. "Coffee, sugarcane, and cattle. More than 280 souls live and work on these lands." The carriage climbed the avenue of imperial palms that led to the main entrance. Carolina could see the senzalas organized like a small village, the chapel with its bell tower, the coffee-drying yards, the workshops, and the school. It was like a city in miniature, a complete and self-sufficient world. On the main house's veranda waited a mulatto woman of about 50 years, elegantly dressed in navy blue chitao with white lace. Her grey hair was arranged in an impeccable chignon, and she carried the silent authority of one who had administered a large property for years. "Donna Carolina," said Miguel Henrique, helping her down from the carriage, "I present Señora Benedita, who administers the house and cares for everything I cannot oversee." The woman made a respectful curtsy, but Carolina perceived in her dark eyes a sharp intelligence that evaluated her with discretion. "Welcome, Sina Baroness," said Benedita with a melodious voice. "The entire house has been prepared to receive you." The interior of the main house exceeded all of Carolina's expectations. The noble wood floors gleamed like mirrors. The jacaranda and vinhatico furniture were works of art in themselves, and the walls displayed paintings of Brazilian landscapes and family portraits. A crystal chandelier from Bohemia hung over the main parlor table, reflecting the afternoon light in 1,000 small rainbows. "Your quarters are on the 2nd floor," Miguel Henrique explained, leading her up the carved wooden staircase. "You have a complete suite, with a private sitting room and a view of the rose garden." The quarters were spacious and well lit. The canopy bed, the jacaranda wardrobes, the desk by the window, everything breathed refinement without ostentation. Carolina noticed that the doors communicating with Miguel Henrique's quarters were closed, a sign that he would respect her privacy. On the marble dresser, a chest of fine wood waited, adorned with delicate mother-of-pearl inlays. A card was attached. "Wedding gift. Open when trust blossoms in your heart. M.H." Carolina lightly touched the polished surface of the chest, wondering what secrets it might hold. What mysteries did this man reserve, and what future awaited her in this place that was now her home? The first months at Santa Rosa Farm passed like a nebulous dream, where Carolina moved between reality and the sensation of living someone else's life. She woke every morning to the sound of the chapel bells that rang at 5:30, calling workers to begin their activities. From her quarters window, she contemplated the farm's morning movement. Women heading to the coffee yards with baskets on their heads, men leading oxen to pastures, children running among the fruit trees in the orchard. It was a small universe that pulsed in harmony, each person knowing their place and function. Miguel Henrique showed himself to be a courteous and respectful host. They breakfasted together in the main parlor, conversing about general matters. The weather, news arriving from the court, books she had found in the library. He never invaded her privacy, nor made demands of a wife beyond educated presence at meals. "You are free to explore the property as you wish," he had told her one February morning, while tasting the steaming coffee. "Benedita can accompany you and show you every corner of the farm." It was thus that Carolina discovered the school that functioned in one of the main house's dependencies. Benedita explained that Miguel Henrique had insisted on educating all the property's children, besides teaching trades to women in a sewing workshop that operated 3 afternoons a week. It was his mother's idea, God rest her soul, Benedita told her, while they watched a group of girls learning to embroider. Donna Elena always said that ignorance was the greatest of slaveries. The Baron maintains the tradition. Carolina was intrigued by this reference to Miguel Henrique's parents. He spoke little of his family, only mentioning that his parents had died when he was 28 years old, victims of the same yellow fever epidemic. They married young, Benedita added, as if reading her thoughts. He was 25, she 16. They were very happy. I never saw a more united couple. The Baron inherited this capacity for love from his father. The statement planted a seed of curiosity in Carolina's heart. What kind of love would be capable of inspiring such dedication even after death? In the library, she discovered an impressive collection of books in Portuguese, French, and Latin. Miguel Henrique surprised her one afternoon, examining a volume of Camões's sonnets. "Do you like poetry?" he asked, approaching with delicacy. "My mother used to recite Lusitanian verses when I was a child," Carolina replied, closing the book carefully. "They always seemed like music made of words to me." "There's also a harpsichord in the conservatory," he offered, indicating a door at the back of the library. "If you wish, I can teach you some simple pieces." Carolina felt her heart accelerate. It had been months since she'd heard music, and the prospect of having this form of beauty back in her life brought unexpected joy. Could it be possible that something deeper would flourish in this marriage of convenience? April afternoons brought with them a subtle but perceptible change in the relationship between Carolina and Miguel Enrique. He began inviting her for evening walks through the main house gardens when the golden light of late afternoon transformed everything into a dreamscape. It was during these walks that they conversed with greater freedom. Miguel Enrique showed her the rose garden his mother had cultivated, the orchard where he had built a treehouse as a child, the overlook from where one could see the entire undulating valley covered with coffee plantations. "How did you get that scar?" Carolina asked one afternoon, when curiosity finally overcame discretion. Miguel Enrique instinctively touched his neck, as if the memory still caused pain. 10 years ago, there was a fire in the old senzala. It was night, and some families were trapped. I went in to rescue the children who were crying in the last room." He paused, watching the movement of leaves in the wind. "A burning beam collapsed on me. It was worth it. We saved all the lives." Carolina felt something tighten in her chest. This man who seemed so reserved possessed a heart capable of silent heroism. "Is that why you chose me?" she murmured. "For seeing me care for orphaned children?" Miguel Enrique stopped walking and turned to her. His green eyes seemed deeper under the golden afternoon light. "Partly, yes," he admitted, "but also because I saw in you a dignity that no adversity could break. Your mother raised a daughter of rare character." The compliment brought color to Carolina's cheeks, but also a strange sense of pride. It had been months since anyone spoke of her virtues. "Tell me about your first wife," she requested, with the courage that growing intimacy gave her. Miguel Enrique's face darkened slightly. "Isabel was a distant cousin, daughter of farmers from Vasuras. We married when I was 29, she 22. She was a sweet, devoted woman." He sighed deeply. "She died in childbirth with our first child 5 years ago. The baby didn't survive." Carolina felt a wave of compassion envelop her. Now she understood the melancholy that sometimes shadowed her husband's gaze. "I'm deeply sorry," she whispered. "For a long time I thought I would never again open my heart to someone," Miguel Enrique continued. "But you brought something back to my life that I thought lost forever. What would that be?" "Hope." That night, Carolina sat by the window of her quarters, watching the stars that twinkled over the coffee plantations. The mysterious chest continued on the dresser, awaiting the moment when trust would blossom in her heart. Could that moment be closer than she imagined? May arrived, bringing with it Carolina's birthday. 19 years that she had never imagined celebrating as a baroness on a Paraíba Valley farm. Miguel Enrique organized a small soirée in her honor, inviting some neighboring farmers and their families. The main house filled with light and music. Women wore their finest silk and taffeta dresses, men dressed in impeccable frock coats, and discussed coffee prices and news of imperial politics. Carolina felt for the first time truly accepted in that social milieu that had previously seemed unreachable. Miguel Enrique's gift left her speechless. A ring with light blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, a family heirloom. "It belonged to my paternal grandmother," he explained, slipping the jewel onto Carolina's right middle finger. She said the sapphire represented fidelity and wisdom. During the soirée, Carolina played harpsichord for the first time in public since arriving at the farm. The Bach pieces Miguel Enrique had taught her flowed from her fingers like crystal water, drawing sighs of approval from the guests. "Your wife possesses exceptional talent," commented Colonel Pereira's wife, an elegant lady from Vasuras. "She is a woman of rare accomplishments." Carolina noticed the pride that shone in Miguel Enrique's eyes and felt her heart warm with a joy she hadn't experienced in a long time. It was also in May that she began calling him simply Miguel in their private conversations, abandoning the formal Señor Baron. The change occurred naturally during a harpsichord lesson when he approached to correct the position of her hands. "Like this, Carolina," he murmured, his large, calloused hands delicately covering hers over the keys. "Let your fingers dance, don't press." The physical proximity, the warmth emanating from his body, the discreet lavender scent that emanated from his clothes. All this caused a whirlwind of sensations that Carolina had never experienced. When he said her name in that intimate way, she raised her eyes and found herself lost in the depth of that green gaze. "Miguel," she whispered, testing the sound of his name on her lips. He smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his physiognomy, making him seem almost young again. "I like when you say my name that way," he confessed. It was also that month that Carolina discovered the secret garden. Miguel Henrique took her one afternoon to a hidden clearing behind the orchard, where he had planted exclusively white roses of various species: valley roses, Bengal roses, climbing roses that formed small, perfumed arches. "It's for you," he said simply. "A place where you can always come when you need peace." Carolina walked among the rose bushes, breathing in the intoxicating perfume that filled the air. It was like being in a dream made real. How could a marriage that had begun as a commercial transaction transform into something so beautiful? The St. John's Festival of 1877 was the most magnificent the region had witnessed in years. Santa Rosa Farm received families from throughout the province for 3 days of celebrations that included folk dances, equestrian competitions, banquets, and on the main night, a fireworks display. Carolina wore a water-green satin dress that Miguel Henrique had specially ordered from Rio de Janeiro, with golden thread embroidery that gleamed in the torchlight. She felt, for the first time in months, truly beautiful and happy. During the quadrille, she danced with various guests, but her eyes constantly sought Miguel Henrique, who conversed with other farmers about political and commercial matters. When he finally invited her to dance, Carolina felt as if the entire world around them disappeared. "You are radiant tonight," he said, leading her through the steps of the contradance, "like a fairy tale princess." "It's the dress's merit," she replied, trying to hide the blush that colored her cheeks. "No," Miguel Henrique replied, his eyes fixed on hers. "It's your merit. You brought light to a house that had been in shadow for too long." After the dance, he led her to the White Rose Garden, where the party's music reached them like a distant echo. The full moon illuminated the flowers, creating a scene of ethereal beauty. "Carolina," he said, taking her gloved hands, "I need to confess something I can no longer keep to myself." Her heart raced. There was something in his voice, an intensity she had never perceived before. "When I asked for your hand in marriage, I said I did it out of respect and admiration. It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." He breathed deeply, like someone preparing for a dive. "I had been watching you longer than I confessed, not just that Sunday at Santa Casa, but on various occasions when you went to Valence's center. Every gesture of yours, every smile dedicated to children, every graceful movement, all of this was engraving itself on my heart like a red-hot brand." Carolina felt her legs tremble. His words resonated like celestial music in her ears. "I am hopelessly in love with you," Miguel Henrique continued, his voice almost a whisper, "more than I thought possible to love again. If you could find a place in your heart for a corresponding feeling, I would be the happiest man in the empire." At that moment, the first fireworks exploded in the sky, painting the night in golden and silver colors. Carolina raised her eyes to the light spectacle, then returned to gaze at Miguel Henrique's face, illuminated by the festive flashes. "Miguel," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "my heart has not belonged to me for a long time." It was then that he kissed her, the first true kiss between them, soft as the touch of rose petals on skin, but laden with all the passion they had kept for months. Could this be the moment to open the mysterious chest? Back in her quarters after the festival, Carolina felt the long-awaited moment had arrived. The fine wood chest waited on the dresser like a guardian of mysteries, and she knew that trust had finally blossomed in her heart like a rose in May. With trembling fingers, she lifted the delicately worked lid. The aroma of sandalwood exhaled from the navy-blue velvet-lined interior, revealing treasures that made her hold her breath. In the center rested a necklace of genuine pearls, each perfectly spherical and nacreous, holding an emerald pendant carved in the shape of a heart. The jewel radiated a soft light under the moonlight entering through the window. Beside the necklace, a letter sealed with red wax and the initials MHTA embossed in relief. Carolina carefully broke the seal and unfolded the excellent quality parchment paper. "My dear Carolina, if you are reading these words, it means your heart has opened to the possibility of love, and I can barely contain the joy this prospect brings me. The necklace belonged to my mother, who received it from my grandmother on her wedding day. Donna Elena said the pearls symbolized the purity of true feelings, while the emerald represented the hope of lasting love. Isabel had my youth, my first passion, my learning about what it means to love a woman. But you, Carolina, brought me back to life when I thought my heart had died with her. You are my second chance at happiness, my rebirth to love. Would you accept me as your husband, not just in name and in the eyes of the law, but also in heart and soul? Would you accept to build with me a love story that honors both the past and the future? Forever your devoted husband, Miguel Henrique. Tears of emotion rolled down Carolina's cheeks as she read and reread each word of that passionate confession. At the bottom of the chest, she discovered yet another treasure, a different ring from the one she wore, more delicate, with an inscription engraved inside. Eternal Love, 1/13/1877. It was the ring that had belonged to Miguel Henrique's mother, offered as a symbol of a marriage reborn on true foundations. Carolina went to the mirror and put on the necklace, observing how the pearls enhanced the whiteness of her skin and how the emerald seemed to capture all the moonlight. She slipped the new ring beside the first, feeling that something was completing in her soul. A soft knock on the door connecting her quarters to Miguel Henrique's startled her. "Carolina?" came his voice laden with anxious expectation. "Could I speak with you?" She opened the door and saw him standing at the threshold, still wearing the festival clothes, but with his vest unbuttoned and his tie loose. His green eyes immediately sought the necklace at her throat, and a smile of pure joy illuminated his face. "So you accept?" he asked, almost breathless. "I accept," Carolina whispered. "I accept being your wife in every sense, Miguel. I accept building with you a story of true love." He took her in his arms then, spinning her around the room while laughing with happiness. When he set her down again, they kissed at length, sealing with that gesture the union of two hearts that had finally found each other. How beautiful it would be to celebrate this reborn love before God and men. December 1877 arrived with summer rains that made the coffee plantations shine like emeralds under the sun. Carolina woke on the morning of the 13th, exactly 11 months after the first marriage, feeling effervescent joy bubbling in her chest. Today they would renew their matrimonial vows, but this time it would be a ceremony of true love, not convenience. Miguel Henrique had insisted on organizing a celebration that would mark the rebirth of their union. The Church of Our Lady of the Conception had been decorated with arrangements of white roses and tropical foliage. Unlike the almost empty ceremony 11 months before, now 200 guests filled the pews, farmers from throughout the region, provincial authorities, friends and relatives who came even from the court. Carolina wore a new dress of ivory silk, with Irish lace sleeves and a train embroidered with silver threads. The veil was also new, Miguel Henrique's gift, of French tulle embroidered with small mother-of-pearl flowers. At her throat, her mother-in-law's pearls shone like drops of moonlight. When she entered the nave to the sound of the organ, led this time by Miguel Henrique, for her father had died 2 months earlier, finally succumbing to his excesses, Carolina felt as if she were walking on a cloud of dreams. All eyes converged on her, but the only ones that mattered were those green eyes awaiting her at the altar, radiant with love. The priest who celebrated the renewal of vows was the same one who had married them the first time, but now his words seemed to have a completely different meaning. "Miguel Henrique," said the cleric, "do you renew your vows to love and protect Carolina, no longer from duty but from choice of the heart?" "I renew them," he replied, his voice firm and emotional, "and I promise to love her every day of my life, with the intensity of one who discovered that true love is a miracle God grants to pure hearts." "Carolina," the priest continued, "do you renew your vows to love and honor Miguel Henrique, now that you know the nobility of his soul?" "I renew them," she said, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "And I promise to be his faithful companion, his confidant, his source of joy in every moment of life." When they exchanged rings, now Miguel Henrique's family rings, engraved with the new date, the kiss that followed was long and tender, celebrated by the emotional applause of the entire assembly. The celebration at Santa Rosa Farm lasted 3 days. Musicians from Rio de Janeiro played waltzes and polkas in the main parlor, while in the yard before the main house, slaves presented their traditional dances. The banquet included delicacies from imperial cuisine and convent sweets prepared by the nuns of Valença. On the night of the vow renewal, Miguel Henrique led Carolina to the White Rose Garden, where there was a special surprise, a new rosebush planted that afternoon, which would bloom for the first time the following spring. "It's a tradition I begin today," he explained, embracing her from behind as they contemplated the newly planted seedling. "Every anniversary of our true marriage, I will plant a new rosebush. When we are old, we'll have an entire garden to tell the story of our love." Carolina leaned against her husband's chest, feeling the strong beats of his heart. "And if God grants us children?" she asked timidly. "We'll plant a special rosebush for each of them too," Miguel Henrique replied, kissing her perfumed hair, "and they will grow knowing they are fruits of true love. How beautiful it would be to see that garden grow alongside their family." The year 1878 brought the blessings Carolina and Miguel Henrique had dreamed of. In September, she gave birth to a girl with chestnut hair and green eyes like her father's, who was named Rosa Maria in honor of Carolina's mother. The birth was attended by the region's best midwife, Dona Lucinda, an experienced Portuguese lady who had cared for countless farming families. Miguel Henrique paced the main house corridors throughout the night, praying and awaiting news. When he could finally hold his daughter in his arms, his tears of emotion moved everyone present. "She's perfect," he murmured, watching the tiny fingers that curled around his index finger. "She's our Rosa, Carolina." The child brought renewed joy to Santa Rosa Farm. Carolina devoted herself entirely to maternal care, but Miguel Henrique insisted on actively participating in his daughter's upbringing, something uncommon among men of the era. "I want to know every phase of her growth," he explained. "I won't miss a single smile, not a single word." The White Rose Garden gained its second plant on their 1878 wedding anniversary, and Miguel Henrique also planted a special red rose bush in honor of Rosa Maria's birth. The tradition was established. The following years passed like a golden dream. In 1880, Miguel Juan was born, a robust boy with blue eyes like his mother's. In 1882, Isabel Carolina arrived, a delicate little girl who seemed like an angel painted by Renaissance masters. And in 1884, Antonio Rosa completed the family, a mischievous boy who from an early age showed inclination for adventures. With each birth, a new rosebush was planted in the garden, which transformed into a true perfumed symphony where the children played every afternoon, running among the flowered paths while Carolina watched from the veranda, embroidering little clothes or reading stories aloud. Miguel Henrique became the loving father he had always dreamed of being. He taught the children to ride horses, to read and write, to know every corner of the property. The daughters learned harpsichord and French. The boys studied Latin and mathematics. All grew knowing they were products of true and profound love. Santa Rosa Farm prospered under Miguel Henrique's competent administration and Carolina's social management, who naturally assumed the role of lady of the house. She organized festivals for workers, cared for the sick, kept the school functioning, and created a circulating library that served not only the farm's children, but also neighboring families. "My wife has a heart too big to be contained in a single property," Miguel Henrique would joke when friends praised Carolina's social initiatives. The love between them only grew with the passing years. They continued their evening walks through the garden, now accompanied by the children's laughter. They still played harpsichord together on Sunday afternoons, interpreting duets that filled the house with melody. And every night, before sleep, they whispered to each other the small joys of the day. How wonderful it would be to see those children grow and transmit to future generations the heritage of true love. 17 years had passed since that January morning when Carolina had entered Santa Rosa Farm as a fearful bride in an arranged marriage. Now in 1894, she watched from the main house veranda her 4 children playing in the rose garden, which had transformed into a true perfumed forest with 17 different rose bushes. Rosa Maria at 15 was an elegant young woman who had inherited her mother's artistic sensitivity and her father's determination. She played harpsichord like an angel and spoke 3 languages fluently. Miguel Juan, at 14, showed natural vocation for rural administration and already accompanied his father in farm tasks. Isabel Carolina, at 12, was a little poetess who wrote delicate verses about flowers and birds. And Antonio Rosa, at 10, remained the family adventurer, always exploring new corners of the property. "Do you remember," said Miguel Henrique, approaching from behind and enveloping Carolina in his arms, "when you doubted we could be happy?" Carolina leaned against her husband's chest, observing the silver threads that now adorned his temples, but which only accentuated the dignity of his features. "It seems like someone else's dream," she murmured. As if that frightened girl who arrived here were just a novel character. She was a brave girl, Miguel Enrique corrected. She just didn't yet know her own strength. The farm had grown considerably in recent years. Miguel Enrique had acquired neighboring properties, modernized coffee cultivation methods, and invested in dairy cattle breeding. But what most made him proud were the social innovations. He had built a larger school, an infirmary with a qualified nurse, and more comfortable housing for all working families. "Papa," said Rosa Maria, running toward the veranda, "when will I be able to marry someone who loves me as much as you love Mama?" Miguel Enrique and Carolina exchanged an amused look. "When you find someone capable of planting entire gardens in your honor," the father replied, laughing. "And who is capable of waiting for trust to blossom in your heart," Carolina added, remembering the mysterious chest that had so long guarded its secrets. That night, after dinner, the family gathered in the main parlor for their weekly music tradition. Rosa Maria played a Chopin waltz. Miguel Juan sang a Brazilian modinha, accompanied by Isabel Carolina's harpsichord, and little Antonio Rosa recited a poem he had memorized, especially for the occasion. "Our family is like a garden," philosophized Isabel Carolina when asked about what she had written that day. "Each person is a different flower, but all grow in the same soil of love." Later, when the children were already asleep, Miguel Enrique and Carolina walked through the gardens under the crescent moonlight. At 48 years old, he maintained the proud bearing and gentle gaze that had conquered her. She, at 35, radiated the serene beauty of a fully realized woman. "How do you have any regrets?" he asked, stopping before the first rose bush he had planted in her honor. "Only one," Carolina replied, smiling mysteriously. "Which one?" "Not having opened the chest sooner." What other secrets would the future hold for that family built upon true love? The year 1895 brought unexpected challenges to the Tavares de Almeida family. A prolonged drought followed by torrential rains devastated part of the coffee plantations, and the financial crisis that plagued the country after the proclamation of the Republic profoundly affected the rural economy. Miguel Enrique found himself forced to make difficult decisions. He gathered all the farm workers in the main yard one March morning, his voice heavy with emotion, as he explained the situation. "My friends," he said, "times are difficult for all of us. But I want you to know that no family will be abandoned. We will sell some of the less productive lands, but we will maintain the school, the infirmary, and the housing. We will get through this together." Carolina watched the meeting from the veranda, once again admiring her husband's natural leadership. Even in moments of crisis, he managed to inspire confidence and hope. It was during this turbulent period that they received an unexpected proposal. A group of English investors interested in buying Santa Rosa Farm for a value that would cover all debts and still leave the family in comfortable circumstances to start over in the capital. "It's a difficult decision," Miguel Enrique confessed to Carolina one sleepless night as they walked through the rose garden. "This land is our life, our history. But our children are our future," Carolina replied with wisdom, "and perhaps it's time for them to know the world beyond these hills." The family gathered in the main parlor to discuss the future. Rosa Maria, now 16, surprised everyone with her maturity. "Papa, Mama," she said, "I learned in this house that the most important thing isn't the walls that shelter us, but the love that unites us. If we need to leave, we'll take with us everything that truly matters." Miguel Juan, at 15, demonstrated the pragmatism he had inherited from his father. "We can use the money to invest in businesses in the city. Coffee won't forever be the country's wealth." Isabel Carolina, always romantic, worried about only one thing. "And the rose garden? How can we leave our flowers?" It was Antonio Rosa, at 11, who provided the solution. "We'll take cuttings. We'll plant a new garden wherever we go." The decision was made as a family. Like all important decisions, they would sell the farm, but first they would hold one last grand celebration, a farewell ball that would gather all friends and workers to celebrate the 18 years of happiness lived in that place. The farewell party was moving and beautiful. The main house filled once more with light and music, but now there were tears mixed with smiles. Carolina danced for the last time in the parlor where she had learned to be happy, while Miguel Enrique toasted with friends who had witnessed his transformation from melancholy widower to fulfilled patriarch. On the last night at Santa Rosa Farm, the family spent hours in the rose garden, each choosing special cuttings to take with them. Carolina carried in her arms the rose bush planted on the day of their true marriage. the first of all. "Wherever we go," said Miguel Henrique, embracing his family under the stars, "we will carry with us the certainty that true love can flourish in any soil." Would it be possible to rebuild happiness in distant lands? Rio de Janeiro, 1900, 5 years later. The house in the Botafogo neighborhood didn't have the grandeur of Santa Rosa Farm, but it possessed a particular charm with its gardens facing Guanabara Bay. Carolina, now 41 years old, watched from the mansion window the rose bushes they had brought from Valencia, blooming exuberantly in the Rio climate. Miguel Henrique, at 54, had become a prosperous businessman, investing in railways and exports, but what most fulfilled him were his children's progress. Rosa Maria had married a young, brilliant diplomat, son of a traditional Fluminense family. The young man had won everyone over, not just through his education and social position, but mainly by demonstrating genuine love for the eldest Tavares de Almeida daughter. "He's like Papa," Rosa Maria had whispered to her mother on the engagement day. "He has eyes that know how to see beyond appearance." Miguel Juan was studying engineering at the Polytechnic School and showed himself to be a visionary young man interested in the new technologies that would transform the country. Isabel Carolina had developed her literary talent and had just published her first book of poetry, dedicated to my parents, who taught me that love is the most beautiful of arts. Antonio Rosa, at 16, was the family adventurer and dreamed of exploring the Amazon, following in the footsteps of great naturalists. "Our children have flown far," Miguel Henrique commented one Sunday afternoon as he and Carolina strolled through the garden they had recreated in Botafogo. "But they carry deep roots," Carolina replied. "Wherever they are, they will know how to cultivate true love." 24 years had passed since that January Saturday, when a desperate young woman had accepted an arranged marriage to save her family's honor. Now Carolina was a respected lady in Rio society, admired for her natural elegance and dedication to charitable works. Miguel Henrique had maintained the tradition of planting a rosebush every wedding anniversary, and the Botafogo garden already counted 24 different specimens. In spring, when all bloomed simultaneously, the perfume was so intense that neighbors commented about the House of Eternal Roses. "You know," Carolina said one afternoon, while embroidering in the arbor covered with climbing roses, "sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I hadn't accepted your proposal that day." "And what conclusion did you reach?" Miguel Henrique asked, raising his eyes from the book he was reading. "That God writes straight with crooked lines. What seemed to be my ruin was actually my salvation." Miguel Henrique closed the book and approached his wife. Even after so many years, he still felt his heart accelerate when he contemplated her. The silver threads in her chestnut hair only accentuated the serene dignity of her face, and her blue eyes maintained the same sweetness that had conquered him decades before. "It was you who saved me," he said, sitting beside her. "You returned to me the capacity to love when I thought my heart had died with Isabel." "Love isn't a resource that gets depleted," Carolina philosophized. "The more love we give, the more capable we become of loving." That night, they received a letter from Rosa Maria announcing she was expecting her first child. The news filled the house with joy. Soon they would be grandparents, and a new generation would grow knowing the love story of Carolina and Miguel Henrique. "Do you think our grandson will plant rose bushes too?" Carolina asked, caressing the belly that would soon shelter new life. "If we teach him that true love needs to be cultivated every day," Miguel Henrique replied, "certainly yes." They walked together to the garden under the Rio moonlight, which reflected on the bay's calm waters. There, among the roses that symbolized each year of shared happiness, they renewed once more the promises of love they had made so long ago. "Thank you," Miguel Henrique whispered, kissing Carolina's forehead. "For what?" "For believing that an arranged marriage could transform into true love. For opening your heart, even when you had so many reasons to keep it closed. For teaching me that love knows no age or circumstance. It simply happens when two hearts are ready to meet." Carolina smiled, that smile that had conquered Miguel Henrique's heart from the first day. "True love," she said, "is like a rose. It needs time to sprout, care to grow, and patience to bloom, but when it finally opens, it perfumes the entire life." And there, in the garden that symbolized their love story, they knew they had achieved what few achieve, transforming a contract into sacrament, convenience into passion, and two solitary destinies into a single journey of happiness that would extend through generations. The perfume of roses enveloped them like divine blessing, and they understood they had created not just a family, but an eternal legacy of true love. Thus ends the story of Carolina and Miguel Enrique, which teaches us that sometimes the greatest loves are born from the most unlikely circumstances, and that the human heart possesses an infinite capacity to transform destiny through the courage to love.